Okay, then, so over to you, Alison.
Thank you. Well, for those of you who don't know me or haven't met me at any point, I'm Alison Holloway, and I'm one of the diabetes specialist dietitians at Sheffield teaching hospitals. So I work with quite a diverse group of patients, type 1, type 2, and other types as well. And I also work in the transition clinic, so age 16 plus as well. So a bit of a mixture, really. And I teach on Desmond courses too. Not quite sure how I do those things, but somehow that all fits in. And I'm going to have a talk, really, I suppose, about diabetes on a budget. And it's actually quite a tricky subject, I thought, the title didn't seem that tricky until I started trying to write about it. And then I thought, there's a bit more to this than I thought. So, well, bear with me and we'll see where we get to with it. But it'd be nice if there was some discussion as well, I think, on this topic, because it could be really personal too. I'm just going to try and share the slides. Just try not to do death by slides, though. That's it. Okay. So when I was thinking about this, I thought it might be quite useful to have a look at some of the context about what is really happening, because I know as an individual shopping for myself and my daughter and 2 very starving cats, that my food bills have gone up a lot, you know, for really quite basic items, you know. And being a dietitian, I do like my vegetables and fruit, and I've noticed that those have gone up quite a lot as well. So I thought I'd see if I could find some figures on how much things have gone up without getting too complex about it, I suppose. And I wanted something quite visual. So I found this graph, which I thought was actually quite good. And it's comparing the retail food price index for all foods, fruit and veg, compared to April 2021. And I think it's actually, even if you don't even look at what the slide means, you can see that things have gone up. And I was really interested to see just how much fruit had shot up actually in that, above all other foods, and also that vegetables have increased in price as well. So when we're talking about a healthy diet and we're talking about, you know, having your 5 a day or more, and we're talking particularly about more vegetables in diabetes and health in general, you know, there is an increased cost at the moment, and that is going to affect some people more than others. My next thinking process was, well, you know, how much does this actually matter? You know, you know, I know from right back from my dissertation was on inequalities in health, and that was several decades ago now. I'm not going to say quite how many, but quite a few. And then I was looking at the links between health and poverty, or health and not having as much money. And I managed to find a bit of information on that. It's not very up to date, but there won't be any change really in the general pattern. This is for men. And I thought this was quite an interesting slide. Someone talk? I don't know if someone was asking something then. Because it shows not only years of life, but healthy years of life. And I think that's really important, because, you know, it won't be lost on all of us that health is really, you know, it's quite important, and it's not all within our, you know, we can't control all of our health, obviously, but we can control some of it. And it really showed that those living in the most deprived or the most poor areas don't live as long, but also don't have as many years of healthy life, which is really important. We really should have fixed this by now, I think. And it's very similar for women as well, although I think actually probably slightly worse for women in terms of health, which I don't think is unexpected from what we know. But does diabetes cost us more? I suppose that's the question. We know that food overall is costing us more. We know that you know, poverty or, you know, living in deprived areas reduces our health. But does diabetes itself actually cost more? And this is where I had to really think, because it's a privileged position really of not really thinking about this in this way before. So I thought, well, what is it about diabetes that could cost more? And I thought, well, actually, you know, I am aware, of course, that some of the changes in diet could cost people more potentially, and we'll talk about that a bit more. Some types of physical activity can cost more, some types are free, so that's, you know, probably a bit neutral in that respect. Travel to appointments and parking, unless you know, have a disabled badge, you know, hospital parking is expensive, and travel to appointments is getting more expensive. Though some of that's probably been offset by virtual appointments. I don't know what you think about virtual appointments, whether you're lovers of them or haters of them in this group. Then anyone liking virtual appointments?
I don't like virtual appointments, actually.
Yeah.
To be honest, I've never had one. I've always had face-to-face.
Have you?
Yeah.
Oh, get you. How have you
Yeah.
managed that?
Don't know, no, just that my diabetic nurse, all through the pandemic, when I went for my reviews, I've always had face-to-face, you know, so been
that's
lucky.
surprising.
No.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm still doing I do some face-to-face work and some phone work. And I think I'm finding there's a mixture between different people, you know. I think on some of the groups, like on Desmond, we're getting a lot more, I would say, working age people, because they don't have to lose the whole day. But then it's harder for people who aren't as techie. So there's always winners and losers, isn't there, in it, I think. So, you know, can save money. But there could be some reduced costs as well of having diabetes, perhaps. And I'm open to argument on all of this. Because some changes in diet might cost less. So if you're snacking less, if you're having smaller portions, it might cost less. If you're on medication for diabetes, you get free prescriptions. Now, what a bonus that is. The sort of bonus that nobody really wants. And some physical activity is free as well. So I'm somebody that tries to look on the bright side of things, even when they're a little bit dark as well. So it's a mixed picture, isn't it, with diabetes itself, as to whether it costs more or costs less, or a bit of both. But it's not just the cost, it's your individual circumstances, isn't it? And it's all right for me to sit here and say, well, it might be quite neutral, but I'm not in the circumstance that anyone else is in. I'm different and you're different. So whereby changes might be good and cost effective for some people and some families, it might be a lot more challenging for others. Particularly where you're a person with diabetes in a family where there's a lot of different needs, for instance. I'll give an example. My daughter has multiple food allergies. I can't just choose any food to buy. I have to buy specific foods. You know, quite a lot of the people I see will have other conditions that affect their dietary choices, like celiac disease, for instance. I have quite a lot of patients who are autistic, and that might be challenging for some foods. So, you know, you can't always shop cheaply. You're not always in that position. Of course, there's also disabilities that affect food preparation or foods that you can eat. And also things like local availability. You know, some areas don't have local shops that have fresh food in them or healthy food in them. I mean, I've got quite a few here now, but when I first moved in where I am now, there was just the one local shop, and that didn't have, well, it might have had an onion every now and again, but it didn't have any sort of fresh fruit and veg that you could go and get and top up on. I'd have to have got in a car or got on a bus journey to go and get them. And that, again, you know, it's not possible for everybody. And then, of course, it's your own skills and knowledge around food as well. Early on in my career in Sheffield, working on community, I used to do quite a lot of cook and eat groups. So I did a lot of public health work. And I've been brought up in a family where the women in the family have taught everyone else to cook. So, you know, I've always been able to cook from being really quite young. And I wasn't prepared, you know, for teaching people to cook who hadn't learnt that. You know, so if you don't know, for instance, that, you know, that you might cut up and boil a carrot and how to do that, you know, that it's difficult then to choose healthily and to prepare things healthily. Equally, I've had clients who don't have any cooking facilities, don't have anything like a fridge or a freezer as well. So again, there's limitations for different people, might make it more expensive. So if we're going to talk about how it is, we need to talk about what that diet actually consists of. And of course, this is individual as well, and hopefully you've had some different individual advice from the health professionals working with you. And I've also tried to take into account that we might have a mix of people here with type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and indeed other types of diabetes as well. So when I was looking at it, I thought I'm just going to pick a few things out and think about those. So the first one on my list is going to be moderated carbohydrate. And I've put it like that. We're not recommending low carbohydrate diets, but we're recommending diets on the lower side, certainly for type 2. And I know that some people with type 1 diabetes are experimenting with that a little bit as well. We would encourage whole grain and high fibre, low glycemic index foods, so things that kind of stabilise your blood glucose, absorb a little bit more slowly. 5 or more vegetables on fruit, always emphasis on vegetables, not fruit. For more than one reason, not just because of the carbohydrate in fruit, but because the evidence says that vegetables have better health benefits than fruit in terms of coronary heart disease and cancer prevention as well. Protein as well, so making sure there's a balance of protein in there, because that can help us to feel more satisfied and not hungry, which is important. Lower fat and reduced salt as well, if we're looking at complications of diabetes as well. Other lifestyle factors, stopping smoking. If you can stop smoking, that is going to save a lot of money. I have no idea how much cigarettes cost now, but I'm sure it's quite a lot of money. I'm sure someone here could tell me how much a packet of cigarettes is, but I wouldn't have a clue these days. I think probably quite a lot. And of course, increasing physical activity as well, because that's the other side of managing the diabetes and complications as well, reducing complications. A few things to think about. And I know there's a lot more to it than that, obviously, but that's the just going basics as well. So thinking about that in terms of kind of food rather than just abstract concepts about diet, which is not always that helpful. We end up going back to the plate again, don't we? Always go back to the plate as the easiest way to kind of explain things. And I'm absolutely certain that everybody will have seen a food plate at some point in their process through diabetes. I'd be very surprised if you hadn't. This one's slightly adapted. So this one's got half vegetables and fruit, and a quarter carbohydrate, a quarter protein. And that's the basis that we tend to use mostly now in diabetes. I know these pictures are not very clear, so I'll just sort of think about that a little bit more, because there's actually no fruit in the, I've just noticed there's no fruit in the fruit and veg side of it. I think that's on purpose because we have this adapted for diabetes, but fruit could be in there as well. And of course, it doesn't all have to be fresh stuff as well. It could be tinned or frozen, whatever you've got, or fresh out your garden if you're lucky enough. And does anyone growing vegetables? I'm growing weeds. I'm trying hard not to grow weeds, but I'm growing weeds. I haven't really, I used to grow vegetables when I was younger quite successfully, and then I just haven't been able to have any success with them in the last few years. They just get eaten by something, not me. So not so good at that anymore. And then the other side is split between the protein and the carbohydrate side of things as well. And that can be animal protein or vegetable protein, depending on your dietary preferences, and also a mixture, which I think a lot of people are doing now as well. We're thinking about this type of diet and thinking about what we do when money is tight. It's just, I guess, thinking about small adaptations, because what I tend to find in practice is people get very worried and anxious about not being able to do things perfectly because life is difficult at a particular moment for lots of different reasons. And what I hope to do is kind of reassure people that your best really is good enough, and that particularly applies when times are much harder, or you're going through a difficult time personally as well. I kind of broke that, broke the information down, I suppose, about what constituted a diabetic diet, and started to think about which of those things, those bits of advice would cost more, which of those bits of advice would cost less. And it was fairly balanced. This was my thinking, but I am open to argument on this because, you know, I was debating a little bit with some things. So if we're looking at things like low GI, or we're looking at things that are high in fibre, a lot of those probably are cheaper in terms of things like pulses and oats and skin on potato. Having said that, things like whole grain bread tends to be more expensive, doesn't it, than your sort of plain white or coloured brown bread. You know, so that sort of balances it out. If you are trying to have less snacks to manage your diabetes or your weight, or because you don't like giving insulin for the snacks, that might actually cost less because you're having less of them. Stopping smoking obviously is a big reduction in cost. Smaller portions, again, a reduction in cost. Although that depends on whether you're buying for a family, because usually if you're buying for a family, someone else will eat the bit that's left if you have a smaller portion, so you don't end up cutting down on money. And then resistant starch, which is that something people have come across, resistant starch? Not everybody. I see a couple of heads shaking. So that's when you kind of cook something starchy like potato or pasta and rice, and then let it cool down. And then when you either have it cold or you reheat it, it forms, the starch in it forms this thing called resistant starch. And that's much more slowly absorbed by the body. So it doesn't have such a big rise with your blood glucose. That's what I mean. So the other one that contributes to that is overnight oats, which has been really trendy because it was really popular in a lot of the slimming groups. And that's kind of where I've seen it a lot, where you soak your porridge oats overnight. So you'd have your porridge oats, some people put them in a bowl or a jar with milk or yogurt and maybe some fruit, and then you put it in the fridge overnight and have it cold in the morning. And that's a resistant starch as well, so it's more slowly absorbed as well. So that doesn't really cost any more money. So leftovers are in, that's what I'm saying. Leftovers are good because they'll probably be absorbed a bit more slowly when you reheat your potatoes the next day or have your potato salad. Lean protein, so if you're having lean proteins, that can be more expensive than cheaper cuts of meat. I've noticed that meat is a lot less fatty naturally than it used to be some years ago. It's been bred that way, I think. So, you know, even cheaper cuts don't have as much fat, I don't think, as they used to do. Reducing salt. Reducing salt put at the table doesn't change anything in terms of cost, really, but a lot of processed foods convenience foods are higher in salt. So if you're cutting down on those, some of those are also cheaper foods, whereas fresh foods tend to be more expensive. So that's what I was thinking of with that being more expensive. And then increasing vegetables and fruit, because we've seen that the cost of those are definitely going up in the UK at the moment quite dramatically. Wow. So it's quite a balance, isn't it, really? So I thought, well, if we look at all the groups, carbohydrate is the one that, you know, we tend to focus on the most in diabetes, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure all of you, well, I hope all of you have had some information or had to think about carbohydrate in some way, whoever's sort of giving you advice, whether that be moderating the amount of carbohydrate or whether it's matching, you know, quick acting insulin to carbohydrate or whatever it is that you do for your diabetes. So I was going to think, well, you know, what are the cheaper forms of carbohydrate? I think the biggest thing here is it probably costs less in the sense that if you're reducing portions, you're having less food, so it's going to cost less. I would say that potato is still probably one of the cheapest carbohydrates, do you think? I think it probably, I mean, they're more expensive than they used to be, aren't they? I think, but I feel that they're still probably cheaper than pasta and rice, because even the cheapest pasta and rice has gone up quite a lot over this last few months. debatable, isn't it? But I think they're probably still are the cheapest. And a lot more people like them, actually, because I still have quite a lot of people that don't have pasta and rice as well. And of course, you can leave the skin on the potatoes, which is a free fibre that you're getting there. I never take the skin off a potato these days. I just throw them in everything with the skin on. I think I must have got out of the habit of peeling potatoes from having to do so many when I was a child. At my grandma's. Yeah, so you get some free fibre there, I guess. Brown rice and pasta does cost more than the white version. So, you know, if that's too costly, then you can try doing the resistant starch thing. So either having it cold as rice or pasta salad, or reheating the next day. But be careful with rice, because you do have to cool it carefully and reheat carefully with rice, because I don't want you to get food poisoning. Then oats not marketed for porridge tend to be cheaper. So if they're marketed as being porridge oats, for some reason they seem to be more expensive if they're just kind of basic run-of-the-mill oats. It's all branding and marketing, isn't it, really? And then trying the overnight oats as well to reduce cooking, which is the other expense, and to create resistant starch as well. So just some practical ideas, I suppose. Has anyone else got any other ideas around carbohydrates that might make them cheaper, or any sort of thoughts about that?
When purchasing particular products, you have to put the oven on. Whereas a lot of products, really, you could just do with putting them in the grill, which would be a lot cheaper for a shorter period of time. And I tried to contact Birdseye, but I was unsuccessful to suggest that to them, because a lot of their products, you have to put them in the oven for 25, 40 minutes. And it can be very expensive for a lot of people. So just to cut particularly if you're only cooking for one, putting a big oven on for a big potato is not rational to me.
It isn't, and I think that is an issue. We've had this discussion in our house because it is just me and my daughter, and you know, quite a lot of the stuff that she has is it just needs to pop in the oven, but you're kind of putting the oven on for, it feels like not a good reason if I've not got enough food in it. I mean, I have before cooked a few jacket potatoes together and then wrapped them, put them in the fridge, and then reheated them in the oven. And I know it's putting the oven on again, but it's not as long, so you're not doing each one for as long, if you see what I mean. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. A good point. I don't think I've even got grill now. Well, it might be integrated into my oven, so I'm not quite sure how. I never even think to use it, to be honest. But yeah, it's a good point. I think cooking's a real big one, actually, for a lot of families where they're really struggling to put money in the meter. Yeah, it is difficult, isn't it, that one?
Yeah.
I question, and I've not compared it that much, but the brown rice and things like that, which are already cooked or in tins, particularly if you go to the budget supermarkets, I think they possibly would be cheaper than cooking dried pulses.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah,
I mean, like the brown rice and the pasta just take quite a lot longer to cook, brown rice in particular, but you can buy it. I mean, I know they do probably cost that little bit more, but you know, 2 portions that you put in the microwave for a couple of minutes, well, not even a couple of minutes, they work out to be cheaper.
Yeah, I agree. And I think
I've not compared it, but you know, if you're going to have to boil beans, dried pulses for 3/4 of an hour or an hour, when you can buy a tin 35-40p, which can be used cold or hot.
Yeah,
they probably would work out to be a lot cheaper.
Yeah, because the dried has always been a lot cheaper, and particularly if you buy sort of bigger packets. But as you say, these days it's comparing it with the cost of cooking it, isn't it? That's the tricky one. Yeah. It might depend a little bit on your family circumstances, because if there's just 1 or 2 of you, the ready prepared stuff is probably going to work out cheaper when you take into account cooking. But maybe if you've got a family, it won't, because because the cost of the ready prepared ones is a little bit more. I don't know. It's going to be pretty close, I think. But yeah, it's a good point. Cooking is an issue. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm particularly struggling financially yet, but definitely thinking about fuel, particularly because we have to have the heating on a lot in our house. Not today though, or tomorrow. It'll be fans for us, which also use power. But thinking about the protein side of things as well, and how to get kind of cheaper protein, I suppose. And I would say that frozen meat or fish tends to be relatively cheaper. There's a lot of offers on with the frozen meat, I think, and also potentially less waste as well for things that are prepared. Using pulses like beans and lentils instead of meat sometimes, or just to spread the meat out a bit, really. There's a lot of health benefits in that in terms of fibre, and particularly soluble fibre, which is good for cholesterol as well, and slowing down, the sort of increase in blood glucose. And some people like them, some people don't. I mean, I don't know. Are you lovers of beans and pulses here, or dislikers of beans and pulses?
I don't like them.
Yeah.
We tend to be a lentil-free house because lentils are a bit odd on blood sugar.
It can be for some people, yes, yeah. I think it depends a little bit. We have to kind of take into account what happens with individuals with lentils. So normally, particularly with type 2 diabetes, we don't tend to sort of count them as carbohydrate. In type 1, it's, sometimes we do and sometimes we don't, depending on someone's individual response to that and how much they have. The interesting thing about pulses and beans is they count in several different food groups as well, which is the only food really that does. So they count as a vegetable, but they also count as a carbohydrate and also count as a protein. So you kind of you cover a few food groups in one thing, which is quite nice with those. Fish wise, I always used to think fish was a lot more expensive than meat, but I'm not entirely sure that it is now. I don't know. You can still get some pretty reasonable priced fish, can't you, particularly frozen. And of course you can use the tinned as well, and there's often quite a lot. They have the offers on those sort of stacks of tuna, don't they? I don't know if anyone ever gets those sometimes get those from kind of cheapy shops, which are quite useful standbys if you haven't got anything in. And of course, going back to work on an egg again, that's going back a few years, I think. That's even before my time. But again, they're cheap and versatile protein, aren't they? You can always make something if you've got an egg in the house as well. And then thinking about the fruit and vegetables, because again, this is another thing, that the prices are really going up. And if we're talking about 5 portions a day, that can have an impact on finances. And in fact, some countries are recommending 9 or 12 portions a day, which is a bit mind-blowing, I think. Anyone here managing 12 portions a day?
No.
This dietitian isn't. Yeah, I think the average is 2 to 3 a day, I think, in the UK portions. So if you're doing more than that, you're doing well.
Yeah, some of the supermarkets don't like to make products for one person. No. I know there are a lot of people who are on their own, but that's all a difficulty when it comes to buying anything really, because you have to buy whatever the supermarket puts that particular product in the quantity that they do, and it can be a tin of, or half a kilo of, or it's always really too much, so you tend to have to buy it, eat it 2 days running, or buy it and freeze the other half if you can.
Yeah, I think freezing is the key really when you're preparing food for one person, because as you say, invariably, actually buying things in single servings is more expensive generally. because they tend to have a lot of multi-buys or bulk packs, don't they, that are cheaper, which when you're on your own, it'll take you a year to get through. You know, so I think freezing is your friend there, really. Or actually buying frozen stuff. So things like frozen veg, of course, you can just chip out a portion that you want or need as well. If you like them, that is, you know. And I think that's important because waste is a cost. You know, I mean, food waste we're trying to cut down on anyway, just from an environmental point of view and a social point of view. But, you know, it does cost you money as well if you're throwing food away. You know, that obviously is not helpful for anyone's budget. Trying to use cheaper veg as well, like carrots and onions, swede, cabbage and things like that. You do have to cook them. Well, you don't actually have to cook them. I would eat cabbage and carrots raw. I'm not going to onions on a salad maybe, but I'm not one of the people that can do the onions like an apple thing. I don't know if anyone does that here, but I've come across it a few times. My first job was in Barnsley and had a few people that like that. Have the whole raw onion as like an apple. I don't think I'd have raw swede. I have to cook that. Sandra's like, no, not raw swede. Well, do you have raw swede?
A nice salad. It does make it, yeah. If you cut it into battens, and you can mix it with celery and like you would celeriac or something.
Cool, right, that's it. I shall try that.
Yeah. But
yeah.
A bit when you're cutting it up, but it's lovely raw swede.
Oh well, I do that. I mean, I do pinch a bit. I mean that's the law, isn't it? When you're preparing food, that is the bonus of being the cook, isn't it? The bits that you pinch.
But no, it makes a nice salad. It does. It incorporates it into a mixed salad. It's great.
That's nice. It's nice colour as well, isn't it? So you get that kind of mix of colours, which I always like on a salad as well. Yeah. So there you are. We don't have to cook it. Especially, well, it'd be nice tomorrow actually, because it's going to be about 30 degrees odd, isn't it, tomorrow? So I'm trying to think ahead to food for tomorrow. And then if you have a freezer, and I recognise that not everybody does, you know, it's looking for reduced stuff, isn't it? That's the thing I tend to go down, because we do have another small supermarket near us now, and they reduce things after 10 in the morning. So if you go at the right time, there's usually quite a lot of veg there that you can snaffle for cheap. And I usually make soup or freeze it as is, depending on what it is. Frozen berries, if you like berries. I have noticed that berries are going off really quickly this year. Things like strawberries and raspberries I buy them and they seem to be going off really, really quickly compared to other years. My theory being that they're keeping them too cold in the supermarket. Might be true, might not. So I find frozen berries quite useful because they can knock around in my freezer and I just pour a few out the night before and defrost them for my cereal or whatever the next day. And then, of course, just, you know, trying to look after those leftovers again, really, and use them either in soup or stew or freeze them for another time as well. It's just using everything, I suppose, isn't it, really? You know, it's not lost on me that cooking and freezing uses power, and there's not very much we can do about the cost of that, which is, you know, a huge thing, I think, for a lot of people. So I suppose the upshot of it really is that a diet for diabetes doesn't have to be more expensive. It can be more expensive, but it doesn't have to be. And sometimes it's more expensive for individuals and individual groups of people because of particular circumstances, and that's very difficult because your circumstances are your circumstances. But there is some support out there for people, and I think, unfortunately, that will be needed more and more as we kind of move forward, really, because I don't think things are going to get better for a while. I mean, the interest rates have gone up today, haven't they? So for people who have got a mortgage, that's going to cost them more money. And I'm guessing that'll be passed on in rents as well, for people who are renting, because landlords, I'm sure, will pass that on. I've noticed that my mortgage rate's going up, but my savings rate isn't, which is an interesting concept. Why does that always happen? I mean, I studied
yeah, because the banks like to keep the money that they're making not on giving us that higher interest rate.
This is true. It's very true. I did study economics once, which was very interesting, but I'm sure that when interest rates went down, my savings went down much quicker than my mortgage, and now it's going the other way. It's not, that's not what's happening. Yeah, I did kind of have a look around for recipes as well, you know, in terms of, you know, for people who need ideas really that might be cheaper or to do with foods that you've got that you're not, you know, when you're not wanting to waste things. And I found a couple of sites I thought were quite helpful. Has anyone come across Cooking on a Bootstrap? I'm sure some of you will have done. This was a person who got into a situation where they, you know, they were really, really poor. I mean, properly poor and struggling to eat. And they've kind of fought fighting the government and all sorts really on food poverty. And they have quite a good website, and there's a lot of recipes on there using really sort of cheap ingredients. It isn't diabetes specific, but you know, I'm sure most of us can use our common sense about what works for us and our diabetes as well. You know, and the same with the BBC Good Food one. They've got some cheap and healthy recipes on their site as well. And similarly, it's not specific to diabetes, but many of those recipes would be perfectly suitable, probably all of them actually. Well, or maybe with a little bit of adaptation. And then I was thinking it's kind of not only about what you are spending, it's about what you can possibly get as well, because if things are really bad, then you need to be able to concentrate on, is there anything else that you're entitled to as well, you know, in terms of benefits and things, which I'll come on to. But there are also some good projects in Sheffield. Sheffield's a really good city for supporting people who are struggling, I think. So there are quite a few food banks in Sheffield, and I've put a link on here, which I'm sure the organisers of this can give people as well if necessary, to the food banks that are in Sheffield. Some of them accept people just going along, and some of them you need a referral from a professional. So you know, you just have to check on that. And then there's some pay-as-you-can cafes as well. There's one in the city centre, one at Zest. So again, that might be quite useful if you're needing to get a meal and you know, money is really tight. And there's also a community supermarket as well. Again, I think that's like a nominal fee, or it might be sometimes you have to pay like a small amount to join, you know, a bit like you would with a credit union or something like that, to be able to access that. Bless you. And then there is a page called Sheffield Money Support as well, which has links around support around finances and includes food as well. So that's worth looking at as well if you're struggling, or if you know anyone that's struggling as well. And then for those of you who are kind of remotely techie and a bit mobile, there's an app called Olio. I don't know if anyone's got that already. Is anyone appy here like me?
No.
No, everyone's shaking their head. No, they're ridiculous, Alison. Olio is a strange one because I haven't worked out yet whether it saves money or not. I'm a bit on the fence with it at the moment. I'm just trying it out locally because I had, weirdly, I had 2 butternut squashes and I didn't know what to do with them because my daughter can't eat them and I didn't want to eat them both myself. So I wanted to give them to somebody. And on this app, you can list items that you have that are excess, you know, things that you don't need. And you can also collect things from people that they don't need. And it's free. There's no money exchanges hands with it. So you can set it up for your local area. And I've noticed that some people, like near us, somebody collects waste food from Tesco's and lists it all on there. So they must be doing that in partnership, I think, with them, with some of the supermarkets. So, I mean, I could go and get free bread every day, some vegetables every day from that for no cost, except, and this is really important, the cost of travelling to get it. And that's why I'm not sure whether it saves me money or not, because I guess that depends. It might be better in Sheffield. I live in Chesterfield. I'm a bit of a foreigner. Because you're in a city, there might be more people closer depending on where you live. Anyway, it's you know, I find it fascinating to see what people are giving away, to be honest. I'm a bit nosy. And then, of course, in terms of benefits as well, if you are entitled to any benefits, a couple of quite good benefits checkers there where you can put your kind of details of your circumstances and situations in. I had a go on the entitled to one, just put in all my, ask you questions about, I don't know, income and circumstances, disability sort of thing, and then highlights what sort of benefits you might be entitled to, if any. And then diabetes.org.uk has got advice about how you get your prescriptions free with diabetes. I'm hoping that everyone knows about that. If you're on any medications for diabetes, you get free prescriptions, but you need an exemption certificate for that. And if you forget, you get a really nice letter telling you that you owe the government money. I had one once. Which came out of the blue, but you're going to get fined if you don't pay for this prescription. It's like, oh, we're exempt from that. But it got sorted out in the end, so it wasn't so bad. So it's a combination, isn't it, really, with this, of thinking about where you're at personally, what you can change, what you can't change, which are the things that are essential to diabetes management, which are the things that are less important for you as an individual, whether you are entitled to any more money, and some people will be and some people won't be, and then places where you can get cheaper or free food if things are really, really tricky and really difficult. I think for me the important thing through this is we're kind to ourselves and kind to other people, because I'm sure quite a few of you have probably been through tough times like this before. It comes and goes, doesn't it? These sort of economic situations for a lot of us. And I suppose that for me, the bottom line is that eating is key to good health. And actually, if it's a decision between eating or not eating, because you're worried about diabetes, it's better to eat something, because you can't stay well if you're not eating at all. And I have seen that in the past. And if your diabetes is well controlled, give yourself a break and don't worry too much about things being perfect all of the time. Sometimes when things are difficult, we have to let other things slip. But we do, obviously need to stay as well as we can as well, because the last thing we want is to be poorly. And for those of you that work, to be off work, because that doesn't help. But if your diabetes is not well controlled, then concentrate on carbohydrate portions. Particularly if you're type 2, because that's not an expensive thing to do. And if you're type 1, to concentrate on the insulin doses, making sure they're right, because those are the things that are going to help with control that won't cost you more money. And then if you are really struggling to manage your diabetes due to your budget and eating, then talk to your healthcare team about it. See if you can get some support, see if they've got any more tips or anywhere that they can refer you as well. For more help. I feel like that was a little bit short today, but I'm hoping there might be a little bit of discussion as well about it. It's useful to hear other people's thoughts, I think, on this, because it's just so personal and so individual, I think. Hi, Brenda.
Well, I just felt just as something I found useful. If I've got some vegetables, bung them all in the same saucepan, cauliflower and broccoli or whatever, take some out before the others are really cooked. And then if I'm cooking, say, a pasta, just bung them in with the pasta. It saves the saucepan, saves the washing up as well. And I think it's the fact that it's, particularly broccoli, the fact that it's green seems to make it look better.
I agree, actually. I think it's colour, isn't it?
Yeah. But it goes with pasta quite well. It takes about the same time to cook.
Yeah, I do the same. I tend to throw in vegetables with the pasta or rice. I think I probably started it through being slightly lazy, to be fair. But you're right. I haven't really thought of it in terms of cost saving, but of course, yeah, absolutely. And as you say, less washing up as well, which is always a bonus after cooking, I think. And also,
I was going to say, from what you were saying earlier on about you've got leftover veg, you can put that in with the pasta at the last minute. It uses it up without being kind of meat and two veg. There's no reason that vegetables that you usually have with meat and potatoes, say, can't go in with pasta or rice, or even sometimes what I do, I get say a lasagna, pre-processed one, cut it in half and then have broccoli with it to bulk it up if you see it. And it makes it look better. Again, it's a green, either leeks or broccoli.
Yeah, and there's some really good benefits there.
Can't hear
you. Reducing the portion of things like your lasagna and having less of it and bulking it with vegetables, of course, you're cutting down on carbohydrates as well, as having more balance in terms of vitamins. And also, if you're putting vegetables in with rice or pasta, it sometimes makes it a little bit easier to have less of the rice or pasta, because you can still see it looks a big portion, but it's not all carbohydrate, which, as many of us are visual eaters, that's quite nice as well. And as you say, the colour, I think, there's nothing as so depressing as a plate of beige food, is there? So it's nice to have a bit of colour on there as well. Although I'm sure when I was at school, vegetables used to be beige as well, but not so beige.
cauliflower.
I try not to cook my vegetables until they're that strange beige colour of school dinner vegetables in the 70s.
Even with cauliflower, even if you cook it so that it's punchy, I don't say what they call it, it's still white. So if you've got white cauliflower with white pasta, it's still a bit.
Well, I always put the greens in off the cauliflower as well, or the inside bits as well. That's another one not to waste as well. Yeah. Anyone else got any thoughts? I mean, I'm not, I'm not in a position of having to be tight about food at the moment. I have noticed a lot more expensive, but I have certainly been in positions in the past where, I've had to make some quite difficult choices around bills and food and things like that. And, it is not a nice position to be in for anyone. And I think that's why sort of compassion and support and understanding is just really important, because we don't know, you never know, do you, when you're going to be in that position, or if you will be in that position again, or if you've been in the past or whatever. It's difficult, isn't it? Really difficult.
Sorry, I've got a quick question, Alison. Thank you for giving this presentation, and it is not necessarily cost related, my question, it's more health related. And in your end slide, you mentioned the appropriate dose of insulin that's important for type 1 diabetic individuals.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about sort of the importance of getting the right dose and what sort of complications can ensue afterwards if that is not appropriately done, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, so the right dose is going to be really individual to each person. So, that is going to be something that we work out with your healthcare team. So usually when people are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, we don't know quite how much insulin they need. I'm sure some of you can.
We cannot hear you.
Someone said something. Who was that?
We just said that we cannot hear you really well sometimes. It cuts off a little bit.
I don't know why. Maybe because I'm slouching. Let me sit up better. Let's try that. So at the beginning, there's usually a process of a little bit of experimentation of finding what works for each person, because we don't know quite how much insulin's still working at the beginning, and that changes over time. And then what we tend to do is get people to keep diaries looking at their food and carbohydrate and how much insulin and their blood glucose. And from that, we work out their doses of insulin. One of the difficulties we have is that people don't always take that dose of insulin, or in fact, any insulin. Bearing in mind, I work with young people from age 16 plus. So it's a difficult time to have diabetes, isn't it, really? So it's encouraging people to take their prescribed doses at the right times before they have their meals. And if it's not working out, to try and look at why. Because, people often feel or know that it's not quite working out, but not quite know what to do with it. that's being helped, I think, with the things like Libre, which are, you know, allowing people to see their blood glucose more constantly. So for those of you who don't know, that's just like a small device that you wear on your arm. I think people with type 1 will know, but perhaps people with type 2 won't necessarily. And you can hold a reader or your phone over it, and it sends the glucose reading to that. So you can see your glucose readings all the time rather than just when you finger prick. And then also we have things like Daphne, which is the course dose adjustment for normal eating. And people will usually go on that with type 1 diabetes as well, and learn more about how to adjust their own insulin doses according to what's happening with their blood glucose. So I suppose when it's not controlled, which is what I was talking about, it's trying to use a process of elimination about why your diabetes is not well controlled. So you might know. So lots of times people come in to say me and sort of sheepishly go, Alison, I'm not doing it. And I go, okay, fine. What you're not doing and why? And it may be that they are, you know, not, either they're missing doses out. So they might be not having quick acting insulin with their meals, or they might be having lots of snacks without insulin, or they might be taking their insulin after their meal instead of before. So there's lots of things that people do as well, and sometimes intentionally, some mostly completely unintentionally, and sometimes just to do with how life is for them at the moment as well, and need a bit of support. And we usually work through those things and try and get people back into the right routines of things with support. I have no idea if that's answered your question or not. I'm sure you're going to tell me.
It did indeed. Thank you very much.
I thought I was rambling a little bit then and thinking, do you know, have I actually answered the question that you asked? But we got there in the end. I suppose it's, you know, I have a few people, sometimes they really worry about their diet. And when you look at things, it's actually their insulin that's not right. And the same thing that can happen with type 2 as well. Sometimes, you know, when your control goes really bad, you know, people assume it's their own fault, and often it isn't actually their own fault at all. It's just the diabetes has changed over time. They might need different medications. So that's really important to know. It's not always your own fault. In fact, it usually isn't.
Can I just ask a question? I don't use these sorts of products myself, but I know people who use these protein powders and protein drinks that you can make up for energy boosts, for sports training and things like that. Can they work out cheaper than meals sometimes, or are they just generally expensive?
They tend to be quite expensive, and I wouldn't advise them except in very limited circumstances. You know, food is the best way to get food, really. You know, for almost everybody. Right. You know, I do quite a lot of work with disordered eating as well, and you know, they can feed into that really, because it's not normal, is it? You know, you haven't got the texture, you haven't got. It's missing the pleasure. Food is pleasure.
Yes.
You know, so they might be used like in various sports and things like that, and that's a different thing altogether, isn't it? But I think for the average person on the street, just eat food. Yeah. Always food. Yeah, definitely.
Cheers.
There's something in the chat as well. I'm just going to go up and I haven't had a look what's in the chat, so I'll just have a look if I can see. The price for 20 king-size cigarettes, £12.64 in April 2022. Ouch. That's a lot, isn't it? Gosh, I hadn't realised they were so expensive for cigarettes. Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? And it, you know, it's a type of addiction, isn't it? You know, and it's you know, if you kind of you know, if you're kind of you know, addicted to nicotine, that's, you know, it's not always as easy as just giving it up, is it? I suspect a lot more people probably will try and give it up because of the cost, though, if they can. But again, there's links to poverty, isn't there, with smoking rates as well, because of the stress of situations that people are in. So it all ties in together, really. I'm not sure about vaping, whether vaping is a cheaper alternative to cigarettes or not. I suspect it might be. Oh, is David going to tell me? Is that a... Oh, no, that's a pen. I thought you'd got a vape then, David. On David's iPad. But I think it's a pen in your hand. You're on mute, but I think it's a pen.
Yeah, that pen.
That's a pen, yeah. I thought you were telling me a vape was cheaper for a minute.
No, sorry, I was just trying to look at the chats.
That's okay, yeah. I think the only other thing I've got in here that I can see is Josie saying, does anyone have a Libra reader that they no longer use? There's been a problem with Libra readers. I'm sure that won't be lost on those of you who found out that. So mostly using people's phones at the moment.
Yeah, apparently they're quite popular, but they no longer manufacture the readers. They only make you use your phone. And mine at the minute, my Libra, that won't even work. So I just wondered if anybody had one that they no longer used, or if they knew of anybody that had one.
I don't know. Yeah, because that's the thing, that they're not compatible with every phone, are they? Because we've had one or two issues where people have updated their phones and got a new phone, and then not been able to upload their Libra data. So if anyone uses Libra and you're going to change your phone, do go on the website and just double check the compatibility before you swap your phone as well. Technology is brilliant when it works, isn't it?
Yes, when it works, yeah. Because I've not got anything at the minute now, which is proving to be rather difficult.
It is, yeah. Have you spoken to anyone at the hospital, see if they've got anything?
I've rung them, but they've not returned the call yet. I rang them the day before yesterday.
Right, okay. Yeah, there's been a bit of a problem with Gateway today, so...
Right.
A little issue with the things that happen behind the scenes sometimes that you don't know about, which is where someone forgets that the person who's doing something needs the other things cancelling, so they're actually double or triple booked at the same time and trying to manage it. I think that was a bit of today.
Yeah, but we don't always get to know about that though, do we?
I know you don't.
Know until you just told us.
I know, and yes, well, I didn't know until I was trying to do something. I was trying to get hold of someone at Gateway today, and that's how I found out. Because yeah, you don't know, do you?
No, just exactly.
It gets frustrating on both ends, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Definitely, yeah. There's never enough people, is there?
Yeah. Moving on from your point of food is pleasure, if a person has another medical condition, say like a hiatus hernia, and it's been recommended to reduce fruit, would you suggest, kind of would still give the person a healthy diet and all the other things, but with the other medical condition, it's advice in the contrary to what they should be doing? What do you?
Yeah, that's always a problem, isn't it, when you're managing multiple medical conditions, and it's something we come across quite a lot. And yeah, I suppose what I always try and go with is kind of which one affects which the worst, and how can you replace what's missing. Obviously, if fruit is triggering problems with your hiatus hernia, that is, that's quite acute when that happens, and it's, that's really unpleasant for you. It might be worth experimenting, because sometimes people can manage, for instance, things that are cooked, like stewed fruit rather than fresh fruit and things like that. So it's worth experimenting with things like that. Fruit is not as important as perhaps we might think it is. Vegetables are much more important in terms of health. So even if you weren't able to manage fruit, but you could manage vegetables, you could get most of what you need there, certainly in terms of things like cardiovascular risk and cancer risk and things like that. Vegetables are more important. Probably one of the things you might be missing a little bit more, although vegetables have it as well, is vitamin C, because you get more vitamin C in fruit. That's easily fixed, if you you could even get a sugar-free squash that's got vitamin C added to it, for instance, or you could take a vitamin C supplement if you were worried, or just if you're really limited on fruit and veg, I'd say to take just a general one a day multivitamin and mineral supplement, and then get your fibre from other foods that you can manage.
Okay.
you know, if the bottom line came to, I can't tolerate any fruit or veg, then take a good multivitamin and mineral supplement. Doesn't have to be expensive, just supermarket owned one a day is fine. And then make sure you get your fibre out of the other foods that you have.
Vegetables.
But you might need to experiment a bit with the fruits, because I've tended to find in the past there are some things that people can tolerate, but it's really individual. Do you know what I mean? It's the same with reflux and things. You know, sometimes people can tolerate all sorts of stuff, and then there's one thing that they just can't have.
Apart from oranges, what fruits then would be non-acetic?
Do you mean acidic? Do you mean acid?
Yeah, sorry, acidic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it just oranges, or would it and grapefruit?
Well, oranges are quite acidic, aren't they? All the most fruits are, actually, because most of them have got you know, most of them are made up that way, really. So it's not something we would normally even think about, and I think it's probably not helpful to think about fruit in that way, because even with things like hernias and with reflux, as I say, some people can tolerate things that are quite acidic, but other people can't. And some people can tolerate a portion of, but not 2 portions of. You know, so it's really with these things about experimenting for yourself individually. So don't just kind of read something or get what someone else tells you. Have a little bit of experiment, but definitely try cooked things like cooked apple and things like that, because they tend to be a bit more easily tolerated for some people as well. But I wouldn't particularly worry about whether things are acidic or not. I think you can drive yourself around in circles. I think that's what I'm saying. I'm a very basic.
He does generally.
I know. I know, food can be like that though, can't it? Because there's so many messages, and if you're managing several conditions, or survey, because my daughter has some health conditions, and obviously I'm a dietitian for a living, so when they give us dietary information, I'm like, oh, hello, here's the dietary information they're giving us. Let's look at the evidence base for this. And I've laughed and laughed about it, because she's had like about 4 or 5 different diets recommended for different conditions, and they all clash with each other. And I think, you know, actually, although I can laugh about it, I think, you know, if I wasn't a dietitian and couldn't just sit here and go, nah, that's rubbish, or yeah, okay, that's really important, or, you know, that's actually really hard. I think that's sometimes when you do need to see a dietitian, sometimes if you're really struggling to manage the different conditions together, that can be hard, definitely.
Yeah.
It's funny from the other side sometimes. Yeah.
When you cook your food.
Oh, you've gone mute. You went mute halfway through, David.
Can't hear you.
There you go. When you cook your food and you're caramelizing, is that transforming something into sugar that wasn't available as a sugar beforehand, and so you didn't count it as your carb? Is there a sort of, are you creating carbs in the cooking process? This is probably a Sandra question as much as or a Samantha.
I was going to say that's taking me back to food chemistry, isn't it? Which was some years ago. But you're not creating a carb, are you? You would be maybe changing the properties of it rather than creating it, because you can't make a carb if can't make a carb if it's not there. If you see what I mean?
No, I think it's there. It is there, obviously, but when it caramelizes, I mean, some things you've got to put. Some things you probably have to put more carbs in to caramelize it, if you understand my meaning. Whereas, like, say I think we've all done it. Let something boil dry and it's caramelized because of the sugars in the pan. Say, like in the carrot or anything as it leeks, anything. You can caramelize it, but I don't think it changes. It's there. It just that it's adapted into a different form of the carbohydrates. Has that gone sticky?
Yeah.
To brown?
I think so. Yeah.
Something like that. I mean, it is the chemistry of it, but because it's a sugar, the sugar part of the carbohydrates, it browns. It goes. Like.
I mean, whether that changes
if you were browning it.
I mean, whether that changes how it absorbs is an interesting thought, isn't it? I mean, it's the same. You're not changing the thing itself, are you? It was already in there, but whether it makes the availability different, I think, is an interesting thought. That I don't know the answer to that.
It might be. It might make it that it is absorbed quicker, probably.
Yeah. Possibly if you're breaking down structures, because with carbohydrates, you've got that complex structure. That's the bit that makes them a bit slower. But if it's kind of breaking anything of that down, then I guess it might be slightly quicker. The only way you look at that is if you did your experiments as well. But I don't advise you purposely burn your food, because that's not really very good for you either. And also, it doesn't taste good.
Well, some do.
Well, yeah, okay. I'll give you that. Some do. Not your burnt leeks. They won't taste nice.
I suppose you could look at it in terms of when you make jam, you've already got the sugar content of the carbohydrate within the fruit, but then we also add sugar to make it burn to a temperature that is suitable for the jam to actually set at. So you are caramelizing it to a degree.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you're changing the state so much, are you, maybe, as when you caramelize it? But yeah, you are, as you say, you're heating it to set, aren't you?
Yeah, adding to it, yeah.
Interesting. Gosh, I never thought I'd be doing food chemistry when I came on here. That wasn't my favourite subject at university, I have to say. My first course was...
Sorry.
That's all right. I was going to say the first year of my course was shared with a food chemist. I did a nutrition with dietetics degree all those years ago. And food chemistry wasn't my best subject.
I was going to say to David, is that because you tend to burn your vegetables like I do sometimes?
That may be a possibility.
Walk away and forget about them.
I tend now, I don't cook vegetables like that. I mean, I tend to put almost all my vegetables in just a microwave steamer now. Got one quite a few years ago, fairly cheap, and I just kind of whack them in there because there's only 2 of us, so it doesn't have to be particularly big portions. So it's quite hard to burn them in the microwave. I mean, it's possible. I think I did actually
them easily.
I actually did burn broccoli in the steamer once. I don't know how I did that. That was a bad day.
Some things easily dehydrate as well in the microwave, even if it's a microwave steamer.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah. I'm just now imagining David's burnt leeks and burnt vegetables.
I have them often.
We were talking yesterday, Sandra, myself and somebody else, about people who don't know how to cook veg, because
it's really
people
common.
don't. We were talking about how, we're going back a few years, how we're always taught domestic science and how to cook, whereas nowadays they don't have that sort of lesson. So you get people who you may produce, sort of from the food bank, vegetables, but do they know how to cook them? So
I mean, I have seen that in practice. I have recently needed to talk through with someone what to do. Someone who wasn't very much different in age to me, so someone in their kind of 40s, so not a youngster. What you do with the broccoli when you buy it, how you get the broccoli from what you get when you buy it to on your plate. Knowing how to pair it, whether you need to put any water in, whether you anything like that. Had not any idea about that at all. And when I was doing kind of cook and eat classes early on in my career in Sheffield, I'd had to, I don't peel carrots now, but then I was like, in my naivety, was sort of expecting to be able to give someone a carrot and they would be able to prepare it and put it in a pan. But actually, they just didn't know that you might cut that end off and peel it or chop it, or that you'd put water in the pan and that you'd put it in, and let alone how long for, or what it was supposed to look like when it was cooked. You know, and so you can imagine if that's the position you're coming from, trying to do a lot of these money saving things is really hard.
Yeah. That was the other thing, is somebody came up with people with learning disabilities, and you get the sort of like recipe cards. Why we couldn't get these recipe cards in picture form rather than written form, where they can actually see somebody peeling a carrot and then putting it in a pan with water, which would be an excellent idea for those that do have this sort of problem.
Yeah, I mean, we still have quite a lot of patients who can't read and write in Sheffield, and I have quite a few people on my case at the moment who have got various levels of learning disability, and yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I know, again, with the Cook and Eats, that was something else. I did one with kind of young mums, and again, because I've been following recipes since I walk probably, I knew that you go 1 2 3 4, you work your way down the recipe, but these ladies were like going 1 4 3, there wasn't even a process of following the pattern through. So it was really good learning for me as a dietitian to have a better understanding of where other people come from in terms of food and cooking. But you're right, I think a lot of the food banks do will help people out with advice about how to prepare things and things as well, because they tend to be very practical minded.
Yeah, but that's okay if you go and pick them up, but a lot of food banks deliver, so you don't go in like a shop and say, I want that, I want that, I want that. Yeah. The actual food parcels are already made up and they're delivered to your home. So this is how it came about, because I actually delivered one to a young guy, and the veg were fresh, it had come off an allotment. And I thought, does he know how to cook that? Because I wouldn't. The veg that they gave him was something that I'd never tackled. So, yes, it's fine getting fresh veg, but, if it's just going to go to waste because they don't know how to cook it, then obviously you need to address it.
Yeah, I agree.
That could cause waste, couldn't it, Shirley? Yeah. And they've not add any nutrition out of it, so really it's defeating the object, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because if you think about it, how do we learn to cook and prepare food? We either learn from our parents or grandparents. You're not learning at school anymore.
No, exactly, that's what we were saying.
So now I would say probably now we're on second or third generations, that definitely second, possibly getting into third. Some families.
I think it comes from your background. If your mum taught you how to cook, you teach your children how to cook, and then it's all about, sometimes when they go off to university, then they have to, because it's fast food. I know my daughter didn't cook much, but she cooks a lot since she's been to university, and it needs most.
It's amazing.
And a budget.
I have to say, when I went away to university, because I could already cook. I mean, for a dietitian, my Saturday job was baking in a delicatessen. So I used to bake all the scones and the mince pies and the cakes before I went away to university to study nutrition and be a dietitian. Little known fact, dietitians often are really good bakers. Just let you in on that secret from behind the doors.
From my experience, the dietitians, they like eating them as well.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Definitely. University, I was well equipped. I could cook really well, and what I didn't know how to do was shop, because my mum would always run the shopping, so I didn't know what I needed to buy and how much, and I came back with some ridiculous amounts of food sometimes from the market because I didn't know how much to ask for and things like that. So that was my issue. But when I was on the course I was on, we had to do cooking in a kitchen, cooking things like gluten-free bread and lots of things like that. We had to cook a roast dinner. I don't know why, but we did quite a lot of that in the first year, and there actually was very few people there on that nutrition course that could cook, which I thought was quite interesting. You know, so I did quite well on that one because I could, but yeah, it was quite an eye-opener. And certainly we would have got marked down on our practical placements. I know someone that I was on a practical placement with was marked down because they just didn't have enough knowledge about food and different food that people eat. Because of course you need that, don't you? You need to know what people buy and eat to be able to advise people as well. Yeah, it's interesting, people's knowledge. I mean, there used to be a lot of cook and eats in Sheffield because there was a lot of public health work going on. I mean, this is some years ago now. I mean, I've not been involved in anything like that since they kind of got rid of public health budgets. But I think some of the, you know, some of the local organisations still do them. But COVID will have put a stop to that, won't it, for a while?
I think, hello.
Hi, Brenda.
Yeah, I think it's quite easy with something like broccoli or cauliflower. You can imagine what it's going to be like on the plate. I mean, I know Lucy Whelan from Diabetes UK gave us a piece of advice which I thought was very good. And she said, when you serve up, fill half the plate with vegetables and then put your meat on and then put your potatoes last. But I think with something like cabbage, it's all too easy to think, oh, that'll be a portion size. Put the cabbage in, and when you finish cooking it, especially if you put too much bicarb in, which you've got a teaspoon, well, a dessert spoonful, and that's your lot. Because it's not only how much to buy, it's how much of that product you cook for one portion, if you know what I mean.
I have the opposite problem with cabbage. I always end up with enough for about 5 people. Yeah, and I think if you're learning, it's hard. I mean, even with the carbohydrates like pasta and rice, isn't it? It's hard to know how much.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I think cooking skills are lacking. It's really important life skill is knowing how to produce a meal for yourself, isn't it? Well, and your family as well. I mean, I'm all for convenience foods, don't get me wrong. I'm not a purist when it comes to food. I'm very practical and pragmatic about food and convenience and things like that. But I think when times are hard, ready prepared stuff tends to be more expensive. And that's going to be really hard. I think that's going to be really hard.
If you overcook something like that, the amount, perhaps you don't do it again. My husband, he decided to cook some spaghetti. He didn't know that it wasn't supposed to buy a whole packet. He has spaghetti everywhere.
You were eating spaghetti for quite a while then, I would imagine. Cook the whole packet. That's another one. I can never get that right. I should buy myself one of those measurers one day.
Yeah, but you buy them and then you put them away and you can never find them.
No, I'm not very good with gadgets. I like the look of them because a lot of people are using like the kind of little like ninja foodie type things, aren't they now, to stop themselves having to use the oven so much. And I keep looking at them and thinking, what a really good idea. And then I think, I know that's just going to get left somewhere and I'm not going to use it. So I'm really trying hard to resist buying one. Because I know I won't use it. But I've seen a lot on a lot of the sort of money saving forums and things like that of people using them, and finding that they save them money in terms of cooking because it takes less time. But I don't know, a bit of a traditionalist in that sense.
I think we're all like that, yeah.
Some people are really good with gadgets, though. I mean, kitchen gadgets, I'm just dreadful with. I really like them, but I haven't got that much space really for them either. So
that's the problem. Where'd you put them? We've only got a small kitchen.
Yeah, and then you end up a few years later sending them to charity somewhere or giving them away, don't you? So,
oh, you found it at the back of the cupboard. Oh, that's where it went.
Yeah. I've now got this picture in my mind of all the things that I know that are in the back of my cupboard. That's what I'm going to leave this evening's meeting with. My, thoughts of all the things that are lurking that I should probably use.
Yeah. Or they're in the garage or somewhere.
No, I'm clearing the garage. That's being done. That's okay.
Oh, well, there you go then.
I find it interesting that you were saying earlier on that youngsters aren't being taught cooking skills, but general perceptions of a lot of younger people these days, they probably know how to order some food from, or some junk food.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy though, isn't it? I mean, you know, I mean, I can sit here now, and if I want to, I can get some. Yeah, if I need some milk, I can go and get that ordered. I can, you know, if I want McDonald's to come to my door, I could get that ordered. Yeah, and I suppose I don't have a big issue with it in the sense that, you know, it is really helpful to be able to do that if you don't have the skills. Easier, I think, to get the sort of high fat, high salt, high sugar stuff that way. There are a few more, I think, in Sheffield of places where you could get healthier things that way. There definitely isn't around me in Chesterfield. I mean, if you want takeaway, it's basically Chinese, Indian pizza.
Well, I'm from Dronfield, very similar experience, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It's something me and my daughter talk about.
You've gone quiet again.
The only thing I've found is there's a sandwich shop up the road that does a really nice salad box, you know, pre-prepared salad box with just some cooked meat and loads of salad. So we'll get that. But, you know, it's takeaways, some takeaways, the lowest quality takeaway food with the highest fat and the highest salt is the cheapest. That's the thing. And if you've got young people in the house and you know they'll eat it, then it'll cut down on waste as well, won't it? Whereas, you know, so it's really complex why we're in this situation. There's such a lot of factors to it. Just look at streets in poor areas, how many low quality takeaways.
Yeah.
Lots and lots, isn't there?
Yeah. I used to take my daughter to Huddersfield University, that's where she was staying, and I used to have to walk round while I picked her up and brought her back. And the amount of Greggs there were, every alley that you turned down, there was always a Greggs. You could guarantee you could have a Greggs.
Yeah. And you can get a healthier choice at Greggs, you can get a healthier choice at McDonald's, but you know, it's a conversation I have quite a lot with, because I work with the clinic age 16 plus. You know, obviously we do a lot of talking about Greggs and McDonald's FC and what's available and things like that. You know, and you know, you can choose.
Oops, we missed that bit.
I do have the nutrition information online, so that's helpful. But we've got to make healthier eating easier and more available, haven't we?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few centres that people will just give the spare food, or shops will just leave it outside for people to pick up. It's free. The amount of bread, like you say, that's free. You know, I came across it once when a vaccination centre that I was helping out at, and I'm thinking, why is this food here? And I realised
that's really great. Yeah,
people were taking it. So yeah, they still, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I've not seen any of that. I've only ever seen that when I've been to company shop, when they've had bread and lemons ones, I think, were free. But
no, this was just sat outside on a wall. I just wondered. I thought somebody had left the shopping, but no, it was for people to pick up. So that was quite good.
That's really good, because you know, food waste is it's travesty, isn't it? Really, we shouldn't be having the level of food waste that there has been. It's just not acceptable anymore, is it? I don't think it was ever acceptable. I just don't think we really knew about it. But I think certainly now we know about it, most of us would be like, no, that there's very little really that should go to waste. Obviously, some things are spoiled and have to, but you know, there should be a way to use most things, really.
And I think the food banks are suffering as well, because people can't afford to give that extra that they've always bought to a food bank, because they're having to tighten their belts. So I think, you know, it's a bit of a quandary for them. Is you know, where do they get the food from? They've always been open for people to be charitable. So when you're doing your shopping in Asda or whatever it is, you just drop it in the trolley and then take it. But you know, you walk past and the trolley's not as full as it used to be.
Oh. No, actually, I've noticed that in our local supermarket, there's not as much in there as there probably used to be. But as you say, I think a lot of people are kind of battening down the hatches, aren't they? They're kind of they're trying to protect their family finances, even if they're not in a difficult situation now. They're kind of planning ahead for things getting more difficult and trying to kind of think about their own situation and their own family. But of course, there's nearly always going to be someone a lot worse off. I did once ask, actually, I stopped and asked the guy that was doing the food bank stuff in a local big supermarket here. I said, what is it you actually need in that basket? What would you like me to get if I was going to put something in there? And he said, we need toiletries.
Yeah.
Toothpaste, toothbrushes, shampoo, shower gel.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I went to China, and every hotel used to get. And my friend said, "Oh, I take it back." I says, "I give it." She gives it away. So that's what I did. The shampoos, the conditioner, the slippers. They all came back, and then went into one of the food banks because they want toiletries. So, yeah.
I never even thought of that. That's it. I mean, I don't get into a hotel very much these days, but and certainly not ones that give you any decent toiletries anyway. But that's a really good idea.
I collect them all in my bag and off back again. Bring them back and then put them in a send to food.
Yeah, that's a good idea, isn't it?
I think for a lot of people, making a menu out, I don't personally do it, but I think making a menu out for a week would certainly cut down on food waste.
Yeah, I find that really difficult because I'm very much a what we're having today sort of a person, but I have the privilege also of being able to create something out of anything that's there. But I think if you struggle with what to do with foods, I think a bit of planning is quite helpful. Probably at the shopping list stage of just thinking out at least what meals you're going to have as a family, isn't it? So that you've got kind of a protein for each day and your carb for each day and things like that. Can be really helpful. I'm not a great meal planner. I'm a bit more spontaneous.
That also comes back to a bit of training and guidance from somewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, I'm on a few conversations that people have about really, like a lot of people throw away food, as soon as it reaches the kind of best before date and things like that, whereas I was sort of taught to look at it, smell it, taste it, and decide. And I noticed that some of the supermarkets have stopped putting dates on some things, haven't they? Like some of the fruit and veg.
Morrison's stop doing it on milk.
Yeah. To try and stop people from just throwing stuff away because it's reached a date. I mean, obviously there's some things that are used by, that's different. And you've got to, your own individual health circumstances will dictate what you do with things, won't it, as well? But I think for the majority of healthy people that, it's learning, it goes back to that basic life education again, doesn't it? Although I did have to throw some ham away that my mum was still eating. And I was like, Mother, you can't know. That's even past it for me.
Yeah. And Alison, in the use by date, why do some people stick to that? I mean, is it dangerous to eat something past its use by date?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? So the use by date, there will be some leeway in it, but it can't be sold past that date. Legally it has to be taken off the shelf. So there is obviously a risk in that it could have spoiled. So it tends to be on things where there is more risk to them, fresh products. It's all averages though, isn't it? They obviously can't test that individual food and say this one's definitely going to go off by next Tuesday. But they know that foods in that category might do. So I think probably for me, I would have to recommend as a professional that you don't eat it past a use by date. Me in my personal life, I don't have any particular risk factors for my own health. So I would just consider that whether I felt it was spoilt myself. My daughter has health.
Can't hear
you. Because she might be at more risk. So I think it
I've
just
never
depends
had any problem. I've never had any problem, you know, a day or so eating stuff. And I know some friends of mine say, oh, you can't eat it past the use-by date. An example of that is, you know, if you buy, say, a lasagna and it says don't, I wouldn't warm it up once it's been cooked, but I cut it in half and then put half in the fridge and eat it next day once it's opened. And it doesn't seem to, well, I haven't had any problems from it yet. Because the other thing is, you know, you either eat it because it's there and you don't want to waste it, or you throw half of it away. And neither of those appeals to me. So I just cut it, you know, cut it in half, put the other half back in the fridge. And so I'm only eating half the number of carbs on the packet. And then I veg with it.
I think the one for me is best before, because best before really is it's best before, and it's not going to cause you any harm afterwards.
Yeah.
It will taste or smell as good as it did before that. The example is tins, isn't it? People have had tins that have been quite a while out of date and been all right, but there's always a risk, isn't there? I guess.
It's an old joke. There's an old joke. My attitude is, if the date's in P rather than D, it's all right to eat.
Yes,
I always
just say I haven't killed anyone yet.
I think if I mean, smell is and sight and touch is a main one, because you can see if something's sticky, that it's going off, or it smells. I mean, I think most things 2 or 3 days afterwards would be fine. It's just that they've got to have a cut-off point. And where you would have the most problem is on something like your minced beefs or something like that, where it's all been mixed up. Whereas you can't always guarantee that you're probably going to cook that. Say you made a beef burger or something like that, or a meatloaf or something that you've got, unless you've got a thermometer. I mean, I personally always use a thermometer anyway. I mean, one time you would just stick a knife in the middle and feel it. But I think if you know that you've actually reached the temperature to ensure that you've actually killed that bacteria, you're pretty much safe. It's just if you don't cook it. But I mean, I certainly use things. I didn't in my professional life, but I do certainly at home. I mean, you can see, you can smell. In the case of milk, it'll curdle, you know. But at the end of the day, what's butter and everything like that? I mean, you know, it's not going to harm you, but it just doesn't look very nice.
Yeah, and I'd agree. I think the only proviso on that is, the only caution is if you've got, if you're pregnant or you're immunosuppressed, or if you've got young children or something like that, which, you know, that's common sense as well, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Then you just need to be extra careful, don't you, with that? Yeah.
I think if anybody wants to buy a gadget, I would recommend a thermometer.
I've never used one. I'm definitely of the stick a knife in it and see if it looks good thing and it's hot.
I mean, I have done, but it is a good guide, particularly if you do tend to use things out, and I do. I mean, I openly do. Or if you're buying it with that date on it, freeze it straight away. You shouldn't really freeze it on that last day, but no, there's no problem. Just freeze it, chop it in half, freeze it, or something like that.
Can you use a thermometer with, I mean, obviously not at the same time, with microwave foods? I mean, is it the same temperature that it's got to be?
Yeah.
Don't put the thermometer in the microwave.
No, that's what I was just thinking.
Yeah.
That could cause a disaster.
A lot of ovens or even don't have a thermometer, but you could put a thermometer in your joint, for instance, and then use it. But I mean, a lot of them these days are quite. But no, just keep probing it. As long as you're in the centre, then you're fine.
I suppose the other way around with the microwave, isn't it? Because isn't it hotter in the centre?
Well, yes, it does tend to. Yeah. But
you have to check the outsides. And
that's why you should agitate or let it settle so that the microwaves disperse, and then put it back on for that last boost. That's why you have to normally do microwave things in in 2 bursts.
How do you know what temperature it should be at?
Well, to kill bacteria, it should be 75 in the middle. But if you like a rare steak, you don't have to get that far.
I'm just reading the chat. So that's why I probably look like I'm just here with my mouth open, concentrating on the screen. I'm just checking if there's any more questions. A few people just saying they're having to go. Someone's also putting, oh, that's Lindsay anyway, has put, look up badge of taste or bags of taste. Sorry, bags of taste. Yeah, it's a typo. I'm like, big? No, bags of taste.
Bagel of taste.
In Sheffield.
Bagel.
Oh, that would be nice as well. Yeah, bags of taste in Sheffield. So what do they do? Does anyone know what they do? Not heard of them. I'll have to look it up, won't I, like everybody else? I'll do that.
Yeah.
It looks like they do student home cooking course for students. So you can follow them on a website, I think. And then they do bags. Wow, Lindsay's wanting to talk about it, not me.
Oh, I'll have a look at that. That might be useful because we have, obviously, in my clinic, have quite a lot of students actually coming through as well. So that might be quite helpful. Yeah. All my students are living off Greggs as well. So, you know, they often work, you see, if they get jobs, they often work in things like McDonald's and Greggs and stuff as well. So, and they get food on the job. Well, everyone's gone quiet. Does that mean it's home time?
Yes, bedtime, pajama time.
Bedtime.
Pajama time.
Pajama time.
Crochet time for me, I'm afraid.
I would say, are you crocheting anything nice?
I'm making a baby blanket.
Oh, lovely.
Not for anybody, but just because I want to.
Yeah. My eldest daughter's into crocheting and I could never do it, but knit, so I can't crochet, but she's done really, she's made herself all sorts of little things and big things.
Oh, little known fact that in my non-dietitian life, I'm a crochet designer. So I designed for one of the magazines. And
oh, do you? Oh, very good.
Yeah. So I'm always crocheting something. The weird things we do in the background, you see.
Exactly. Yeah. We've all got
baking.
We've all got hidden talents that we don't really want to share.
Oh yeah, I'm ready for the apocalypse. Me, I've got all sorts of things I can do.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm the place to come.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was doing serviettes into water lilies on Saturday for a renewal of vows for somebody.
Wow, it's good, isn't it? I think creativity is really good.
Yeah, my origami talents came out. That's what you get when you watch Blue Peter years ago.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not very good at origami. It just ends up like little screwed up bits of paper if I try it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. But has anybody got any more questions for Alison? So I'll take that as a no.
That was a no.
Yeah, and thank Alison for giving up her time and coming along to this to have a really good presentation. I think we've all benefited from that. It's a really good question.
Have a little chat as well.
Yes, yeah, but it's a bit on a more informal basis. So it's
yeah, I like things to be informal. Probably noticed.
But thank you very much, and thank you everybody for. Yeah,
you're welcome.
Thank you everybody, and hope to see you on Saturday.
See you on Saturday. Bye.
Bye.
Have a good day.